At Raising Cane's, we're hyper-focused on being the best at what we do and getting it right every time. Cook-to-order chicken fingers, cane sauce, crinkle-cut fries, coleslaw, Texas toast, iced tea, and lemonade. It's our one love. But is the hype real? Yeah, it's real good.
Raising Cane's chicken fingers, one love.
Next time, order with our app or online.
Welcome to the #1 podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city, so I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
No problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
You just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're going to lose. Coming down the stretch, you're going to lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about MSU's 72-66 loss to the Arizona Wildcats on Thanksgiving Day in the Aggressors Classic. If you appreciate the content we give you for each and every pre- and post game, then head on over to tffinots.com/support and consider supporting the show through a one-time donation on PayPal or Venmo or recurring means on Patreon or Substack. Also, December 1st is the deadline for the Beat Rod contest for the prediction for the final Big Ten standings. Email your predictions to me at Eric, that's ERIC, at tffinots.com with your picks from 1 to 14, final standings of the Big Ten, your name, and how many points Michigan State scores against Michigan this season. And just as a reminder, they play twice. All right, Rod, let's talk about the game against Arizona. I thought it was a very entertaining game overall. It looked as if MSU was outmatched early on in the first half as it got down by a bunch, as many as 15 points. But then sort of behind the play of Tyson Walker, largely in the first half, they stayed in contact and only trailed by 7 going to half until a long last-second three went in by the Wildcats, which led us to a 40-30 lead at the break. In the second half, the Spartans really turned on the defensive intensity, I think primarily behind the play of Jaden Akins. He was a real menace, and then started scoring at the other end on the offensive side of the ball too. And amazingly, remarkably, Michigan State, through the tough defense, kind of scrappy play, managed to come all the way back and even took the lead. It was up 66-63 with just a few minutes to play. But then Arizona went a 9-0 run to finish the game and ended up winning 72-66. So I thought, if nothing else, a very entertaining game, which some of these big games have not been entertaining, like Purdue-Tennessee was a close game, but there's so many fouls. It wasn't much fun to watch. But this one was very entertaining. So what are your impressions of the game?
I am with Tom Izzo when he said that he's not a fan of comebacks, because it's a fairly obvious thing, but it's real. Like, well, you've got to have done some things wrong to be in a position to need to do that, right? And Michigan State's been in that position way too often in these first 6 games. Yep. So we've talked about it a lot here. I think most MSU fans have. You just see these, and again, the problem in this one, I just think in that first half, I'll admit to thinking at times, boy, I'm just not sure that Michigan State's backcourt is big enough and physical enough to hang with these guys, because Arizona has, as we talked about, they have some big physical guards. I mean, I did not have a sufficient appreciation for just how physical Boswell is. I knew about Love and I knew about Larson, and Bradley to some extent, but Boswell I really didn't have as good a grip on. And just as a group, they really took it, I felt, to Michigan State for a lot of that first half. That's how they got a 15-point lead. And then in the second half, you see a great
Mhm.
response from MSU. You talked about defense really leading the way, and I think that's true. I think MSU's perimeter defense was outstanding in the second half. So somewhat of a reversal of the Duke game, where they were great early and then in the second half, not as good. In this game, first half, they struggled. Second half, for most of it, they showed why the Michigan State backcourt was held in such high regard. I think you can make a case that it was Jaden Aiken's best game of the season. I think, Tyson Walker didn't have his biggest scoring output, but as you said, he flat out carried them for portions of that first half, and I think he was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, as I'll get into in a second, I wish we would have seen more of him at closing time. AJ is, once again, the player that is very, very, I mean, even, this was an example of even in the same game. So you mentioned Michigan State taking that 66-63 lead. Well, how did they do that? AJ Hoggard took over for a stretch, and Arizona couldn't stop him. And then, after they had the lead, but had to keep going in order to close it out, AJ decided to start becoming a jump shooter. And he didn't hit any. And it's where Michigan State, the bottom line is, you mentioned that 9-0 run before I think Michigan State got a couple free throws late to end it, if I remember correctly. That was AJ. In that situation, if AJ is not going to be playing downhill, then the ball ought to be in Tyson Walker's hands in that kind of situation, and it wasn't. It was AJ deciding that it was time to play a little hero ball. And I get it. You go on a run the way he did, you're feeling extremely confident. But I'm sorry, in a game like this, and given the way he's been shooting this year from deep, if he's not able to get downhill, he shouldn't be taking the shot unless it's a hand grenade situation. He just shouldn't. Him taking 18-foot jumpers or 21-foot jumpers that's not solving the problem, So you come back once again to, will the real AJ Hoggard please stand up? Where is he does some great things to get them the lead, and then the decision-making in the last 3.5 minutes just goes south. And I'm not saying that's entirely what cost them the game, because we can point to the first half performance, which was really about largely everybody other than Tyson, and I guess you could argue Cohen Carr and Jeremy Fierce did some nice things in the first half. Other than that, they didn't get much out of people. So it wasn't just AJ, but it's hard to watch a situation like that unfold and not come back around to him, because you see the very, very good and the very, very bad all in one 5 or 6 minute sequence. And when it's the good AJ Hoggard out there, Michigan State's as good as anybody in the country. I still believe that. I know people will probably accuse me of being a homer for saying that, but Arizona is going to be ranked number 2 this week because Kansas lost, so Purdue will go to number 1. Arizona should be number 2, I think, and they deserve it. And Michigan State was the better team. They were on top with, I think, under 4 to play, right around 4 to play. So it is justifiable for me to make that case. And let's be honest, it wasn't that Arizona played horribly. I think Arizona probably I would think they feel they played pretty well to win that game. But it goes to show you that Michigan State, when it's going, and a big part of that is AJ Hoggard going, they can hang with anybody, just like we thought. So now the question is going, we're faced with something that we really hope we were past, which is the mercurial, inconsistent play from your point guard. And so how do you get past that? Is he likely to find a groove at some point this season? Well, I think you're probably stuck in a position where you have to hope for that. The caveat is that Jeremy Fierce continues to develop, and by February, is ready to just take a lot of that playing time. And maybe that happens. I mean, I was impressed with Jeremy in this game. I'm continually impressed by him. But right now, let's be honest about it. The difference between Jeremy Fears at his best and AJ Hogard at his best is the difference between a tournament team and a team that can actually do damage in the tournament. That's pretty significant. And so I think if you're an MSU fan, look, I'd like to think that I've been honest and consistent about AJ over his career, which means that there have been a lot of time that I've been critical. But I like to think that I haven't denied it when he's done very good things. And there have been lots of those times as well. The bottom line is not really any different than it's been for a long time with this team. They're going to go where AJ goes. And so that's the biggest thing. I think taking a step back, a little bit bigger picture view, I think it was positive that Michigan State was really in this and took such a good team right down to the wire. But, as I think Issa was looking at, the idea is you got to win, and they didn't win. When it came time to make plays, Arizona made plays, Michigan State didn't. And the fact is, when you consider yourself a high-level team and you're playing other high-level teams, that's exactly what you're dealing with. It's going to be a handful of plays late that decide it. And that's exactly what happened here. Michigan State had A.J. Hogard missing jumpers. Arizona had, Caleb Love and Boswell and those guys making plays. And it was that simple in the end.
My impression of Walker, especially at the end of the game, not that he had dead legs, but that he just really looked like he didn't have it. And I don't have a better explanation except
really, because I don't know about that, because I don't feel like he was really put in positions. Look, give Arizona credit for defending well enough to not give up a shot early in the shot clock, but when it's getting late in the clock, the ball was not finding Tyson Walker, and I don't think he was really giving it up. I don't think you think he was deferring.
I think a little bit. I just feel like, especially when he go in the lane the last couple times he put up shots, it didn't look like he had much spring to step at. He just looked tired, and I don't know if that's
that could be.
What it looked like to me.
He played
a lot of minutes.
He played 34 minutes, but
and he was
I don't
sick
know.
before.
You
I don't know.
might be
maybe,
right.
Maybe really more.
Well, so they say.
Maybe enough that he just had. I don't know. I mean, that was just my impression, that he just looked a little tired to me. Maybe that's just because he was deferring a little bit to AJ, and because AJ was, he was scoring a bunch. He was really running the show at the end.
Yeah.
And then then things changed.
But your point guard has to be able to read it, and that includes reading themselves. That's I just can't back away from that. Even look, if it's going to be a possession that results in MSU having to shoot a jumper, I'm still going to take a dead leg Tyson Walker over AJ Hogard, right?
For sure.
Still, and that doesn't mean. And then Jaden Akins had a really, really great second half. Why wasn't the ball finding him in some of those situations? That's on. When AJ is 10 seconds in the clock, and you can see him kind of going into mano a mano. Stuff. Well, he's made a decision. He's not trying to swing it to somebody else. He's made the decision that he's going to try and go make a play. So to me, that's on me.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you to that extent. All right. Well, let's talk about. I guess we'll talk about the player that Michigan State needed to keep in the gutter. That was Kylan Boswell. They did a relatively good job on him. He played 36 minutes. He was 5 of 15 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3. Had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a turnover, 13 points, which was. I guess it's about his average, except his shooting average is way less. What's that?
12 points. 12 points.
So he definitely didn't have as much impact. He certainly wasn't shooting like he was before. I think I remember one 3 that he put up that later in the game that he missed. I was a little surprised because he just had to be. I think he was wide open in the corner. But they were doing a good job preventing him getting things easily. Which, to their credit, I think that was they did a decent job on him.
Yeah, I agree. In the second half, I do think you can say that this mostly continues MSU's streak of doing a good job against this player that we identified. This is a guy who was shooting just an ungodly percentage coming in, and MSU held him to 33% from the floor and 30% from three. They did the job. They also didn't let him, he ended up with 3 assists, so they didn't let him really control the game from that perspective either. He was like most of their players. He was very effective in the first half, far less so in the second, because I think Michigan State ratcheted things up. And if you're looking for silver linings, that is definitely one of them out of this game, I think, which is that Michigan State demonstrated that when they are truly locked in and at their best, they are big enough, physical enough, good enough to hang with anybody. Because right now, I don't think there's a backcourt group that can claim to be playing better than Arizona's. I don't see it. Statistically, that's the case. They've now got, they've got wins over 2 preseason top 5 teams under their belt, one of which was a true road game. That they've done some things already, and Michigan State's guards were right there. So, but containing Boswell was definitely part of that.
And that segment was brought to you by the Brothers of Just Two Gutters. If you need gutter work done in the state of Michigan, if you're on the west side, contact Kurt and his team. If you're on the east side, around the Metro Detroit area, Greg and his team will take care of you. They'll do whatever you need done to your gutters, whether you're residential, commercial, whether you need them cleaned out, just some leaves and junk, you don't want to get on the ladder, or if you need them replaced or repaired, they can do all that. They can put leaf guards on too, so you don't have to get them to clean them out later. The best thing I ever did was put leaf guards in my gutters. It's been wonderful to have my leaves blow off the side versus me having to get up there, especially when they've got some that are 3 stories high. There's no way I'm getting a ladder for that. So the Brothers Just Two Gutters, you can find contact information below in your podcast player or on the episode page at the on the website at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com. You can, again, contact Greg in the east side Metro Detroit area and Kurt around the Metro Grand Rapids area, Saugatuck, Holland, and 10% off if you mention Final Four to your discount at your estimate. So then I guess we can just go over the keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. Number 1, the start. Well, I think we kind of went over that. I felt like, and I don't know if the start, this felt a little different this time to me than it has in the past. Before, they looked sort of discombobulated. This time they just looked overwhelmed. But maybe that's not any better. But they just look like, Arizona just looked like a much better team, bigger, physical, and it looked like Michigan State really had trouble adjusting to that initially.
It would very much be not better if that had not been responded to. Right? I definitely think that most of that first half, it did look that way. And that's very concerning because at that point, if that's really the case, then we're not talking about things that are really within Michigan State's control.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, and this is a stretch as a comparison, but it's kind of like an NBA team trying to deal with peak Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah.
You just, physically, you just weren't, you were going to have to get him or his teammates participating in their own demise. Because if they were locked in and focused, nobody had an answer for him.
Yeah.
Physically, it wasn't possible. And again, that's a stretch. It's not quite that level, but for large segments of that first half, it did kind of look like, hey, we just can't match these guys physically. And then that changed. And that changed because guys like Jaden Akins and AJ Hogard really showed up, and they are players who can play that way, who can physically match up with the guys that Arizona has. They just had to do it. So anyway, none of that changes the fundamental point that the start was not nearly what Michigan State needed it to be. And as Izzo said, basically, I'm paraphrasing what he was trying to get at there. If you need to keep mounting these great comebacks, yes, it's nice that you show that you're resilient, but when it keeps happening, there's a problem in that too.
Yeah.
That you're in a position where you have to do it. And that's where MSU's been. We could say, all 3 losses, what they have in common is a bad start.
Yeah. And you can even say four if you count Tennessee.
Four if you include Tennessee.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. Yeah, I think it was a little encouraging because Hall hit that first three, took it confidently that first three and buried it, and you're like, oh, okay, they're gonna survive, but just got overwhelmed a little bit on the boards and just kind of everywhere.
To me, the biggest thing was that MSU wasn't able to get much in the way of penetration or movement against them, whereas at the other end, I felt Arizona's guards were just kind of getting to the spots they wanted to get to, and Michigan State wasn't doing a hell of a lot to impede them.
All right, so the second key to the game was the glass, and so we thought, this is an excellent offensive defensive rebounding team as Arizona. Could Michigan State get some stuff going? Michigan State ended up rebounding almost 30% of their misses. Arizona 38%, so very good. And overall, Michigan State didn't get killed on the boards, but the end they gave up some that really costly. I think the total number was like 39-34. Arizona had the edge, but for the most part of the game did pretty well. And I think Madi had 10 rebounds on his own, so he had 3 offensive and 7 defensive rebounds in only 21 minutes. So he did his part, and then Blake had 5, and Cooper had 6.
I thought Michigan State's bigs did a pretty decent job of rebounding. But the percentages here, you cited some of the raw numbers. The percentages, you're talking about Arizona having a pretty good edge in offensive rebounding rate, which is what we worried about. Kind of, you hope that Michigan State could maybe do enough on its offensive end to hang in there. And I guess they did in a way. At the end, here's the thing. One stat where Michigan State actually ended up with an edge is second chance points. So what they were able to turn offensive rebounds into, MSU had 15, Arizona had 12. Right. So Arizona did not do as much with their 12 offensive rebounds as they might have hoped. Whereas Michigan State was actually really productive with their 11. But it's hard to say that MSU out-rebounded Arizona. They didn't. So,
it felt a little bit like the Michigan game last year where they gave up the ones at the end that were so painful, that they pretty much solved most of the game and then kind of broke down a little at the end. So the third key to the game, pace. So this is one we were curious whether, how it would go. I mean, in some ways, Michigan State plays fast, and in some ways they play slow. Like, if they don't get a quick opportunity on a break, right out as they sort of set up the offense, then it tends to use up most of the shot clock. So, so fast break points were pretty even. Michigan State had 13, Arizona had 12. I mean, we always talk about how real that seems. But that felt about right. I think both teams kind of were trying to move fast, and I think the defenses were pretty much preventing them from doing too much damage.
Yeah, I think that Arizona had been playing at a blistering pace, so the fact that that MSU was able to hold them to 74 points, and Arizona only had 59 shots, so that does tell something of a story. And I think you're right about Michigan. This is the thing. What I personally would like to see that we haven't seen yet is for Michigan State to pick up the tempo in their half-court offense. You're absolutely right. If they do not get a quick hitter, it becomes a grind. And I think that's a tough way to live. And it's also indicative of the fact that I don't think Michigan State's movement, ball or man, is anywhere near the level that we would expect to see. If those things improve, pace will improve because they'll be able to get shots up. They'll get good looks quicker in the clock. They won't get bogged down as much. I mean, that's at least ideally what would happen. And we're not seeing that yet. So we will see how it goes. But not really a decisive edge for either team in this area. I guess you could argue maybe Michigan State won it to an extent because Arizona was not able to play the way they have in all their other games, whereas Michigan State's performance was much more in line with where they've been. So
And just as a reminder again, that this segment is brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing is a place to get your Spartan apparel and other collegiate apparel. You can head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. They have some fantastic offers right now, especially free shipping on any order over $50. You can get all sorts of vintage Michigan State gear or just regular Michigan State stuff. And then, of course, other schools in the state of Michigan outside of the Wolverines. You can find all that at nudgeprinting.com. 20% off your order if you type in Final Four as one word at checkout. And super wearable, comfortable, breathable, and screen printed materials. It's all high quality stuff. It's great. My family loves it. So I would highly recommend it for anybody else. So again, check out Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. So the fourth key of the game is penetration. And you kind of mentioned, just alluded to this just a little bit ago, that Arizona kind of got their way just doing whatever they wanted in the first half, less so in the second. Michigan State had times when they would get penetration, and certainly when AJ was playing well that one stretch in the second half, he was able to kind of get what he wanted. Maybe part of that was because Larson was out with some foul trouble. That might have contributed a little bit to it. But in general, I mean, I guess it was kind of an even split. There were some times Tyson got a little too deep and got blocked because he got too far in and didn't have anything that he could do with the ball. But I don't know. I don't know what you think about that overall.
I think that's an apt description. I think in the first half, decided edge for Arizona. And then the second half, Michigan State had the edge for much of it. Look, it's a simple truth. For this MSU team, they are going to have their guards living in the lane with much more frequency than we've seen, at least on a consistent basis. Now, you look at this, and this is not just penetration, but penetration had a decent amount to do with it. Points in the paint. MSU had 32, Arizona had 42. That's your ball game. I mean, if you wanna just reduce it to one simplistic thing, that's your ball game.
And that was maybe a little reflected just by what I was mentioning at the beginning of the game. It just seemed like they were getting overwhelmed physically, and I feel like that's where Arizona got a lot of their damage early. What's interesting about that, and this kind of flows into the fifth key to the game, which was the post defense, that the post players, Mahdi and Cooper, did a relatively good job against Ballo. I mean, he had 10 points, but only 3 rebounds.
Well,
Previous
I will say
points.
this.
I mean, they didn't get a lot of damage there, but Johnson did.
Yeah, Johnson did. MSU also got helped out in the second half where Ballo was drawing a lot of fouls and he couldn't hit free throws. He was 2 for 5, but I think he missed a couple of front ends, one-on-ones. Yeah. So that, to the point that they pulled him. That was an interesting thing, is that late in that game, and this is where Michigan State, and I'm glad we're getting to this because it's an important point. You mentioned how MSU gave up just some killer offensive rebounds late in that game. That happened with both teams going with small ball lineups. Michigan State had already made the change, and I think it was because they really wanted to test what Ballo could do defensively. So if you have Malik playing the 5, which he was, well, he's got the ability to hit a 3. Let's see if we can get Ballo away from the rim. Arizona, after he missed, I think he might have split a pair of free throws, but they pulled him, and they went small themselves. One thing that's troubling, and it was troubling last year when Michigan State would go small with Joey and Malik together, I felt that combination did not do well enough rebounding-wise when they were in the game. They really suffered. And I think that was the case. And it was there was another, I think Johnson was playing the 5 for them in that lineup. And yet Arizona, their small ball lineup trumped MSU's in terms of that end of things. And so if Michigan State is going to go to that, Malik Hall and Cohen Carr, not solely because it's your guards as well, but those 2 guys in particular, they got to be able to do a better job than we saw against Arizona in terms of the defensive rebounding end of things. They just have to. because that lineup did not work in large part because of that.
I mean, Cohen Carr is very much a freshman, right? He played 19 minutes, had 7 points, a couple dunks, a couple free throws, but only 3 rebounds. I mean, I feel like he should have more than that, and maybe that's not fair, but he definitely, his presence was important, and, you don't expect a ton from him right now. But, especially like you mentioned, if you're playing small and he's playing your 4, I think you just got to get a little bit more out of him. And I don't break down the film to see, who's in the wrong position or whatever.
Right. I don't want to bag on him because I think he played a really good game.
Yeah.
Both halves, actually. And the fact that he was in there during that closing stretch tells you what Izzo thinks about him. I think he's he's showing some signs of real defensive progress. There was that play late where he came over. They got, you were talking about how MSU did a pretty good job on Ballo, but the fact is there were some things that looked like they would end up being a lot worse. So him missing free throws helped. But another thing that helped is there was a possession where they went over the top, which they were able to do a couple times on Madi, I think it was, got Ballo the ball, and he just expected he was going to have a dunk. Yeah. And there's Cohen Carr with help side defense making the right rotation to strip him. And so Cohen did some really, he's showing some signs, having some moments where it appears like he's getting it. Rebounding, there's no reason in the world why he should not be an elite rebounder. He's an incredible athlete, and he's physically strong enough. We haven't seen one of those games yet. The guy that I was inclined to compare him to most when MSU signed him was Brandon Dawson. Right. And he's a different player than Brandon Dawson. He's actually got, even now, even though he's not shooting threes yet, he's got a much more developed offensive game than BJ had. But what we have not seen yet, at least from Cohen Carr, is the kind of rebounding presence that Dawson could bring, even when he was a freshman. So that's another step that I think Cohen's got to take. But on balance, I think he played a great game.
Well, and to point out, too, he had half the steals from Michigan State. He had 3 other 6 steals. And some were big ones late in the game, too, which were instrumental for that comeback. All right, so Michigan State then will take on Georgia Southern next, back at the Breslin, as they gear up and prepare for the start of Big Ten play, which is kind of hard to believe, but that's sort of a weird week where they play 2 games.
Yep.
3-3, it's kind of hard to know. I mean, obviously you obviously want to win these games as many as you can, and it's always the goal. You don't want to freak out too much about losses. You want to try and progress and get better. I feel like the team is improving, but it's slow, and it's, in some cases, it's not where you hope they'd be at this point of the season. I mean, what is, and I think it's a little bit different that we have Tyson Walker, who is playing a different type of offensive game that we're kind of used to seeing at Michigan State, where someone just kind of one-on-one just takes it, which is fine. I mean, he's very effective at doing it, but I guess, where do you see this team? I mean, do you think we're going to be okay going to the Big Ten season? Is it too early? What are sort of your overall thoughts?
Well, I mean, for now, I don't look. The Big Ten outside of Purdue has not exactly covered itself in glory thus far.
No, unfortunately.
And Michigan State gets Purdue once, and it's late in the year. So if you're asking me, boy, is it a murderer's row that we're looking at? No, I still think there's a lot of reason to suspect that Michigan State is going to have a very strong season in conference play. I mean, the fact is, the idea is to win these games, right? But that's not the critical bit. The critical bit is that you get a level check and you learn where it is you need to make improvement. Now, we've seen Michigan State get off to a start this year that I think was surprising. But then again, you look at James Madison, and James Madison is not a bad basketball team. So if we end up saying that all 3 of these losses come to teams that are NCAA tournament teams, well, that needs to be put in it needs to be put in the equation as well when you're evaluating. But be that as it may, regardless whether James Madison gets there or not, that was not a good performance by Michigan
Right.
State. So they then had to battle back from that. And I think in the Duke loss, they showed some signs. They then seemed to build on that a little bit in wins against Butler and Alcorn State. And then against Arizona, they take a loss. But again, there are some negatives, but there were some real positives. So I think it's about now, as you head into this abbreviated Big Ten schedule, the first 2 games, and then Christmas break around the corner after that, like the question then becomes, can they find really the level of consistency is what we're talking. Can they find the level of consistency that's going to be required in order to, compete at the highest end of the Big Ten as we all expected them to do coming into the season? That to me is what's lacking. Consistency in a lot of areas. They've shown enough flashes. They showed them in this game, where you can look at stretches of the game and say, boy, that MSU can play with any,
Yeah.
And then there are other stretches which cut the other direction. So that's what's got to go. And can they get there? Yeah, absolutely they can. Will they? Well, nothing's guaranteed. So that's kind of where I am. I think that you have to be realistic and say they haven't proven, this particular group has not proven that they've shown enough that you can just write this off and say, hey, everything will be perfectly fine. See you in March. And we'll, or see you in the, the second weekend or the third weekend of the tournament. There's no way to say that right now. But in fairness, there's no way to say that about anybody. As I said, Arizona's going to be number 2, most likely. Did you see a flawless team? I didn't.
Yeah, right.
So everybody's got to deal with that. But I think, I'm not the only point this season that I've truly been angry was those first 2 games. Because that's where I felt, hey, this is Michigan State just not showing up the way that it needs to. It's one thing if you miss shots, you make mistakes, you play badly, but the effort is there, It wasn't that way in those first 2 games. Since then, that's changed. They had a good degree of effort in this Arizona game overall, so that's encouraging to see. But yeah, it's an open question right now, I think.
Yeah, and we're getting 6 games in the season now. Michigan State's 3-point shooting is not great, and so I think again you've seen flashes of people looking comfortable. Bleak hit his first one, but then this next 3 he can hit Walker and a couple. AJ still really has been ice cold out there, much below what he was last year. So that's something that I guess you just need more.
Yep.
We need more numbers, I guess. But we're starting to get to the point where you're like, this might be more of a trend.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
sure. They haven't yet had a game where, what was it, the Alcorn State game, I guess?
Just because of Trey.
No, it was Butler. It was Butler where, yeah, it was Trey. That's right. It was Alcorn State where they just, ended up shooting 40%. That's it.
Yeah, but that was his 5-5.
Other than that,
caused the 40%.
Yeah, right. So I think you're right. I mean, it's surprising to me. I don't think many people saw this coming, but you can't deny the reality of it.
Yeah.
The flip side to that is I do believe this Michigan State team has things they can do and ways to play offensively, even if they are not a very good 3-point shooting team. But we don't see them do that consistently. That gets into penetration, AJ, all of those things start to become very, very important.
Well, some final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it.
Well, I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks to Rock for joining us remotely. And unfortunately, Lions follow the Packers as well. So it's kind of a rough Thanksgiving day sports-wise for Michigan State fans.
Day.
Yeah, it was a bad day. Although I can say that our turkey was the best it's ever been. So that was definitely a good thing. So we'll talk to everybody just a few days before the for the pregame for the Georgia Southern. A reminder also to check out Dutch Printing at dutchprinting.com. Also, the Brothers Domestic Gutters at brothersgutters.com if you need gutter work. And also, you can always head over to our website and check things out. We normally set up for the email list where you can get added to get notified when we have new episodes come out. You can all find all that at the Final Four on the schedule.com. And we'll see you later. Until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.
Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, FDA approved for over 20 years. So, talk to your specialist to see if Botox Cosmetic is right for you.
For full prescribing information, including boxed warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
Remember to ask for Botox Cosmetic by name. To see for yourself and learn more, visit BotoxCosmetic.com. That's BotoxCosmetic.com.